Roll call, please.
Here.
Lane Hilbert.
Here.
Jerome Wood.
Here.
Ken Anderson. Frank Miller.
Here.
Jay Foy.
Here.
Josh Burnett.
Here.
Tom Dow.
Here.
Grace Kessler.
Here.
I have
And since we have one online, we have to follow the virtual online rules for this. So every vote has to be a roll call vote tonight.
the minutes from our June 3rd meeting for your approval.
Moved.
Second.
Only motion, Kent seconds.
Chris Bartels.
Aye.
Lane Hilbert.
Aye.
Jerome Wood.
Aye.
Ken Anderson.
Aye.
Frank Miller.
Aye.
Jay Forrest.
Aye.
Josh Burnett.
Aye.
Tom Dow.
Aye.
Grace Kessler.
Before we begin tonight, we've got 3 items on our official agenda tonight. On each item, we will have I will open the public session and close the public session. Once the public session is closed, there's no more comment by the public to be made after it's closed. So whatever you want to say, you need to do it during that open public forum. But the items under the new business A and B are actually just going to cover them both together. And we're going to have one public session to cover both of those at the same time. So we won't be having separate ones on that, but we will vote on each item separately. Just want to make that clear. Anyone that wants to address the council at the end of our official meeting, there's a form on the back table, and you need to fill that out to request to address the council on any other topic besides what's on the agenda tonight. And we have one that got turned in online, so we do have one person that's going to speak later this evening. So those are the guidelines. Oh, and during the public portion, you will be asked to use the microphone, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state whatever you want to say, comments or whatever. You've got 3 minutes to do that at the microphone. And we can have the first one when it's time for that can come up, and others can be in queue behind them. So we can kind of keep the process moving along and not have people waiting to come up. So the first one, and then we'll just queue around the corner there so we can just hear what everyone has to say this evening. Okay? Now we'll go with our first old item business, please.
Item A, second reading of an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2025, an ordinance amending the official zoning map of Columbus, Indiana, rezoning the subject property from CC Commercial Community to I3 Industrial Heavy, Indiana Precast rezoning. Jeff Bergman.
Good evening.
It's the Jeff and Jeff show.
It does look like that, doesn't it?
I'll take just a minute and get the technology set up here. There we go. All right. So as you all recall from first reading here a couple weeks ago, we do have this request from Indiana Precast to change the zoning on a property they purchased, the former Moosalamis Drive-In site on Jonesville Road. And that property is a little bit over an acre. It's currently zoned CC, which is community commercial. And the proposed zoning is I3, which is heavy industrial. Indiana Precast is the adjacent business, and they've indicated that, in which you've seen on the property, their desire is to incorporate that into their site and basically gain approval for expanding their business onto that property. So if you look at zoning in the area, I think we all know the location there along 11. We can zoom in on that a little bit. This is the current zoning map for that area. So once again, for council members, the red is the commercial zoning, purple is existing industrial, and then we have the Garden City Mobile Home Park, which is there with that RMH label, and then some residential zoning, that RS2 a little bit further to the south. So, in short, the proposal is to change that red commercial zoning for the site to purple to match the I3 that is the adjacent Indiana precast, so they can gain approval for expanding their business onto that property. And as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, this is an initial step for them. Presuming that the rezoning is approved, their next step will be to prepare an administrative subdivision plat to delete property lines and combine those parcels. Then they'll have a site plan approval step, at which point setbacks and screening and those kind of details through the zoning ordinance will be addressed on the property as well. So comprehensive plan, again, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, does not go into great detail for this area. Really paints with a very broad brush, big picture, residential, and then acknowledges some of the floodplain along State Road 11. So here are the rezoning decision criteria that I know you all are familiar with, and state law asks you to pay reasonable regard to when considering the rezoning. And then, as I mentioned last time, this does come to you with a favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission that was unanimous with a vote of 10 in favor and none opposed. And we did have one member of the public speak at that Plan Commission hearing in support of the request. And I'll note that Kent Bayette from Indiana Precast is in the audience back here behind me if you have any questions for him as well.
Questions or comments? Anyone here that would like to speak on this particular topic? I'll open up the public portion. Seeing none, we'll close the public portion. Council, it's back to you. How would you like to proceed on the second reading?
I'll make a motion to pass the second reading of this ordinance.
Second.
Frank Miller,
Aye.
Kent Anderson,
Aye.
Jerome Wood,
Aye.
Elaine Hilbert,
Aye.
Chris Bartels,
Aye.
Grace Kessler,
Aye.
Tom Dow,
Aye.
Josh Burnett,
Aye.
Jay Foist.
Aye.
Second reading passes 9-0. Thank you. Now we're ready for new business.
Item A, first reading of an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2025, an ordinance annexing and declaring certain territory to be a part of the City of Columbus, Indiana, Chase Point annexation. Jeff Bergman.
Now, Frank, if it'd be okay with you, I'm going to have the applicants come up as well. I know we have some comments to make after my summary, and I suspect you might have some questions for them. So we'll go ahead and make room for them here at the table as well. I don't normally get so much company up here. All right. So, Frank, as you indicated, we do have two separate requests, the annexation request and then a companion rezoning request. And again, as you mentioned, I'm going to present on both of those. But again, two separate actions, two separate ordinances for the council to consider. So for the annexation, we're talking about a land area of a little over 107 acres. For the rezoning, it's 106.7 acres. The difference comes in the adjacent road right-of-way that state law says you must annex when you're annexing a parcel of property. So that road right-of-way is the difference between the two. The property is currently zoned agriculture preferred. Proposed zoning is actually two different zoning districts. So for the larger portion of the property, almost 98 acres, the proposal is for RS4, which is residential single-family 4. It is the highest density single-family zoning district that's provided by the city's regulations. And then for almost 9 acres of the property, RM, which is a residential multifamily zoning district. So I'll first speak to the annexation, and this slide provides a kind of a broad view of the west side of Columbus. So the area shaded in the dark blue is within the Columbus city limits. Everything not shaded in dark blue is outside of the Columbus city limits. So you can see our site here for both annexation and rezoning. Really on the north side of State Road 46 between 500 West and Belmont Drive. They're at that northwest corner of the city. Reminder, state law requires that for annexation, the proposed annexation area has to be 1/8 contiguous or 12.5% with the existing city limits. This annexation area is approximately 25% contiguous, so it more than meets that requirement in state law. So we're going to zoom in on that kind of corner a little bit and wanted to share a little bit of context around the annexation piece and city growth in that area. And I think council, we've had some conversations around this in the past. So a couple limiting factors on city growth here. We've got that floodway for Wolf Creek, which is across the north of this site, and then some other properties as it goes back and then merges with Driftwood River, which is a factor in annexation and long-term city growth. And then also in this area, they're shaded in red, we've got quite a bit of existing development. So small to mid-sized properties, mostly along that State Road 46 corridor, that over time were platted off for residential development. And that essentially serves as a blockade on city growth. So we've got, a little bit of that along 46 to the east of this site, and then more of it along 46 to the west of this site. So that movement over time of the city limits and kind of that unusual pattern where it kind of wraps around 46 and back up there to the west, is really driven in part by the existing development that's in that area and the real limitations on annexing that into the city of Columbus. So a little bit of context on how the patterns of city boundaries have evolved out here in this area. And really, I think you'll recall a few years ago, it was the annexation and rezoning request from the folks that developed the Belmont that extended the city limits north of State Road 46, as well as utilities and the road network, and then enabled potential further annexations and development also north of State Road 46. So as we do with every annexation request, the planning department did reach out to the other city departments, really to speak to the second criteria from state law, which is that we're able to provide this property with full range of municipal services. And my colleagues in the departments confirmed that they could in fact serve this property. Most critical in that always is going to be sewer and water service. And again, that infrastructure was extended north of 46 with that Belmont project. So it's available in this area. And then likewise, fire department indicated that they were comfortable with response times to this property. So if we look at adopted city annexation policy, these are 10 criteria the council adopted a number of years ago to guide annexation. I'll note a couple. Number 7 talks about contiguous lands needed for orderly growth, and the implementation of the city's comprehensive plan should be a part of the city. And then number 8 talks about contiguous lands which are likely to be developed in the relatively near future, and notes that those should be a part of the city. So speaking of the comprehensive plan, this is an excerpt of the city's future land use map. So one of many components of the comprehensive plan. And you'll notice that this map, which was developed in really the late 1990s, shows that tan area, which was designated as residential development, the lighter yellow, which was a state cluster, so lower density residential development, and then showed this area north of 46 as agricultural. And again, this map and this guidance dates from about the late 90s. Obviously a progression of development in that area since that time. A couple other notes from the comprehensive plan, goals and policies that it provides speak to a couple topics relevant to these requests today. I won't read all of these. A number of them speak to the provision of housing, encouraging development adjacent to already developed areas, promoting housing expansion where the city's infrastructure and services can accommodate that growth, and then also encouraging new development to be designed in a manner that preserves natural topography and other natural features. So if we transition a little bit from the annexation discussion to the second part of the request, which is the rezoning, this is that same area, but showing the existing zoning. So as we usually see on a map like this, everything in white is, for the most part, those areas currently outside the city limits, all zoned agriculture. And then we see the mosaic of colors of the various zoning districts inside the city limits, where we've got the reds, which is commercial zoning in the West Hill area, and then the variety of different residential zonings through the Tipton Lakes area. So immediately adjacent to this property is the RM, which is multifamily zoning for the Belmont and its related uses. And then to the south across 46, we've got some RT, which is two-family zoning. That is, I forget the name of the subdivision offhand, but it's a single-family subdivision, but in an area that allows two-family from a zoning standpoint. And then we also have some RS2 zoning, which is single-family zoning, but also allows the uses that are there, which are West Side Community Church, and then to the south of that, the site for the new Maple Grove Elementary School. So again, looking a little more closely at that area, and then overlaying what the applicants are proposing for rezoning, we see those two areas where they're proposing to make a change. So the majority of their site, they're proposing for RS4, and that's shown there in that orange color on the map. And then the lesser portion of the site, closer to State Road 46, is proposed for multifamily. Permitted uses in those districts are really straightforward. Like I said, RS4 is a single-family district. Single-family residential is permitted. For multifamily, it would include a variety of multifamily dwellings. It would include duplexes. It would include things like nursing homes and retirement facilities, hence that RM zoning for the Belmont next door. So a few features of the site to be aware of. So this map shows the current floodplain mapping in that area. And we do have Wolf Creek along the northern boundary of the property, which does include some mapped floodway, which is there in the darkest blue color. Reminder for council, floodway is the area that's most regulated, where I think for the most part, it's fair to say that development would be prohibited. We also have some areas of 100 and 500 year floodplain, which are going to be the tan and the light blue colors on the map. Those areas are going to be regulated, but the emphasis there is going to be protecting any structures that might be built. So development is possible in those areas with some restrictions. The other thing I want to note, and the little inset map shows the flood depth mapping that the Columbus Flood Risk Management Plan provides for, in this case, a significant road crossing of a floodplain, which is that 500 West crossing of Wolf Creek. And we had conversation at Plan Commission around access to 500 and any potential that at some point access from this site to 500 might be limited due to flooding. What the Flood Risk Management Plan tells us, and I think what folks in the area would testify to, is that 500 does close due to flooding on occasion. That closure happens really on the north side of Wolf Creek, on the north side of this property's frontage. And the Flood Risk Management Plan and its mapping confirms that that remains the case through a 500-year flood event. So there would not be any restrictions on access from this property to 500 along its frontage, even in the most extreme flood event that there's data available for. Also want to note some natural features on this property. Biotopography on this site. The site falls by almost 60 feet from the areas close to Belmont and close to State Road 46 back towards Wolf Creek. The property has quite a bit of woods. There's 63 acres approximately of woods on the site, so about 2/3 of the site are wooded. There's a small pond on the property as well. And then also want to touch base on roads and vehicle access. So as we talked about, this site is really north of 46. At 2 points, this area property touches State Road 46. I think there's general skepticism based on applicable NDOT regulations that any actual vehicle access to State Road 46 would be allowed for the development of this property. So how does it get access then? Talked about 500 West, which is there on the west side, which property has frontage. And then Belmont Drive on the east side. When Belmont was developed, provision was made, a right-of-way was dedicated. There's no street there, but there is a right-of-way that would connect Belmont Drive over to this parcel. So this parcel has the opportunity as part of any development to construct a new street connection to Belmont Drive, which then in turn connects to State Road 46. So think about those roads. State Road 46 is classified as a principal arterial. It's a state highway. The intent there is to move large volumes of traffic. Belmont Drive, as I mentioned, was designed and constructed as a collector road, with the intent being that it was going to be the road that any future development here north of 46 would feed into, and Belmont Drive would then make that connection to State Road 46. So Belmont meets all the city's current standards for a collector street. Its intersection with State Road 46 has been improved in all regards, really with the exception of a traffic light. But as we talked about at Planning Commission, it's traffic light ready in terms of all the necessary turn lanes are provided, all the pavements there. It's really a matter of traffic light. And then a note about 500 West, it is a minor arterial, so there's a recognition by the city's thoroughfare plan of the role that road plays. It really conveying a lot of traffic, from the Georgetown Road area to the north, down to State Road 46. Belmont is an unimproved county road. The pavement width on 500 is generally 19 to 20 feet, which by comparison for a county road is fairly good. That's a good width on a county road, and fairly close to the city thoroughfare plan's recommendation, which would be 24 feet of pavement width. As a county road, right-of-way on Belmont's pretty limited. It has, for the most part, the 30 feet of right-of-way that's typical for a county road, with some exceptions where there's been some previous subdivision along it and some right-of-way has been dedicated. That right-of-way does widen out when you get to State Road 46, actually considerably, and that intersection then falls into NDOT's jurisdiction. So a few images. Here's Belmont Drive. Looking north, that little white rectangle is a sign that notes that would be the location of the future road connection, if it would be made at some point. So here's Belmont again, looking north at that State Road 46 intersection. Again, it's got dedicated right and left lanes, sidewalks extended, curbs, all of the required improvements. And then here's a look at that Belmont State Road 46 intersection. So likewise, Tipton Lakes Boulevard coming from the south has dedicated right and left turn lane. And then on 46, there's dedicated right and left turn lane. So again, a complete intersection in all regards, maybe minus the traffic light at this point. So again, one more look on 46. And then this is 500 West. This is close to Wolf Creek. We're looking north. And then a couple images. This is where 500 meets State Road 46. So here we're looking back to the west towards Brown County. And then here we're looking back to the east towards town. And then Finally, whenever we talk about rezoning that's going to notably increase residential density, we do like to do an examination of the goods and services that are available around that site. So for this location, nearest commercial goods are going to be at the West Hill area, which is about 1.5 miles away. Certainly not walkable in any regard. You're going to have to get in your car to go to JC or get whatever you need. Also, that West Hill area is going to be the nearest point where someone could access Columbus and get transit service, if that was of interest or need. Then as we look a little closer to the site, Oak Brook Park is the nearest city park. It's about 1.2 miles away. Again, a reminder for council, you all passed amendments to the subdivision control ordinance here a few months ago that presumably would require open space to be provided in this development. The threshold for that open space is 50 lots or more. And I think given the size of the property, that's one would presume that's what we're talking about. So in addition to being aware of that availability of public park space, there will be a requirement on this property to develop some open space as well. The nearest point to access the bike ped network is really right there at that north point on Tipton Lakes Boulevard where it meets State Road 46. The trail system's basically been dead-ended into State Road 46, and from that point you can access all the trails throughout Tipton Lakes as well as the broader City People Trail network. And then of course we're all aware that just to the south of this site is the location for the future BCSC Maple Grove Elementary School. And then once again, here are those rezoning decision criteria that the comprehensive plan asks you all to pay reasonable regard to. And then just a couple notes on the Plan Commission's work on this request. So for the annexation, it comes to you with a unanimous favorable recommendation. There was 11 in favor and none opposed. The rezoning comes to you with a favorable recommendation also. That was by a vote of 9 in favor and 2 opposed at Plan Commission. So there were a number of joining property owners, members of the public who spoke during the Plan Commission's public hearing. I'm sure you'll hear from them also here in a few minutes. Some of the concerns expressed then were overall density that might be possible on the site, possible traffic congestion and traffic safety, as well as the loss of rural character and animal habitat that could occur with development. And then finally, the Plan Commission's favorable recommendation on the rezoning does include 5 recommended rezoning commitments. One of those sets a maximum of 300 homes in the RS4 portion of the property. Another requires a buffer between existing homes and the proposed multifamily zoning area. A third requires the developer to update the traffic study that was completed for the Belmont to include this proposed development as well as the new Maple Grove Elementary School, really with an eye towards demonstrating to NDOT that demand and traffic is such that a light is warranted at the Belmont Tipton Lakes State Road 46 intersection. Finally, there's a requirement that any multifamily development have 2 points of access so that there's those connections both to Belmont Drive and to 500 West at the time that any multifamily development would occur. And then finally, there's a commitment that requires improvements to that existing right-of-way around that 500 West State Road 46 intersection as might be warranted by the traffic study and specified by NDOT. And some of those things might include some restriping, some cutting down of banks to improve site visibility at that intersection, and other, I think, what are fairly described as minor modifications at that intersection that might be beneficial. So I will stop there, and I'll let these gentlemen who have joined me introduce themselves and share any comments that they have, which would be great.
Thank you. Is this, let's push this?
Yep, you're good.
Come on. You're off now.
Yep, push that one more time. There you go.
There you go. Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak in front of you. Tom and I have met with a number of you individually, but for those who we haven't, for those in the room, and also for those listening online, I just want to take a quick moment to introduce ourselves. Tom and Jack Lasky. and our connection to Columbus, just because I know sometimes there can be a fear of development and development coming from outside of the city or those from outside of the city. But we are very much part of this community, and I just want to take 60 seconds just to share that, again, just for everyone's benefit here. Again, Jack Lasky, Tom Lasky, our family's roots in Columbus run generations deep. My mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother were all born and raised here. My great-great-grandfather actually incorporated the Cummins Engine Company. My grandfather worked for Arvind Industries and bought the old Maple Grove Elementary School for that, for their headquarters. And today we still have extended family living and working in Bartholomew County. They own businesses on downtown and go to many of the schools around town. Childhood summers for me were spent exploring Brown County State Park. I still do that today. And fishing in Clifty Creek, as well as near our property. And then those were memories that shaped my love for this community. I come down here quite often, and our family still owns property in Columbus. We are not people from Chicago or out of state who are just trying to come down, build some development and move on. We very much have a connection to this community. And I share all that because given what I just shared, our connection, we are very mindful of the legacy of this development. We want to be proud of this development very much, given our family's connection to this community. And we feel that if we are proud of it, we feel that the city of Columbus will also be proud of it. So I just wanted to take the time to share that. And thank you. I'll close my remarks with that, but thank you.
I think we'll reserve any other comments certainly in response to questions or concerns that anybody on the council might have. And for the record, my name's Tim Oakes. I'm an attorney at Ice Miller. Real quick, Bill Lasky's asked me, called me up and said, hey, would you please represent us in this? We've got this property. It was interesting because it was clear the importance of developing this property. They said there's a housing study that's been recently done that shows this great need for housing in the Columbus market. And we really want to try to address that and address it appropriately. And there's a message, quite honestly, I don't hear very often. So it was kind of refreshing, one. And then two, they really focused on the single family component of this project. Whereas most developers that I work with and who are driven solely by the dollar would gravitate immediately towards the multifamily, and the single family would come second. And they looked at this the completely opposite direction, and I found that rather interesting. And again, it's a reflection of what Jack indicated, which is that this is a very important project for them. Finally, we wanted to acknowledge staff and all the work Jeff's done. He did a great presentation for the project. We think this will work out well. And certainly we thank you for your time and would be happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
I'll kick it off. Very good.
I just want to say that for those that are out there, I have received your list. I have received the names that's been shared with the council. So they do have all of your list of concerns. And sorry, but Kemp, you'll get to go next. And I know there's quite a list of concerns. Council members are probably going to touch on some of those, and I'm sure all of you out there are going to touch on those concerns too. Something that I think most of us already know that Jeff didn't go into the RS4 part of the project. If every acre of that 98 acres was RS4, it could hold 504 approximately units. The Plan Commission did cap that at 300 units, and I believe that the developers have talked around 250 units. So If they wind up doing the 250, they're about at half at what the total capacity of that property could be. I just wanted to point that out. And I know that I have talked with them, like they said, they've talked with some of the council members, and even though they're going for the RS4, I like what they said to me that I heard was that they're going for RS4, but they plan on this being a multifaceted. There might be some lots that are RS3, RS2 in size, and there could potentially be a couple RS1s in there, I think, based on the topography of the property. So that is a big part of that 98 acres is we know they're going for the RS4, but there's no intention of it being totally RS4. I don't know if I want to touch on the RM part yet or not. I think I'll let the council go ahead and ask their questions. But to all of you out there, I just wanted to say that up front, that it's all been that all of your concerns have been shared across the board here. Okay, Kent.
So Jeff, we put a restriction of 300 houses on,
That's correct.
and including all the topography challenges and everything there, would the 500 have still been possible? Like if you throw in the floodplains and the floodways and.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to say, and as these gentlemen continue to work through the engineering piece, they'll know what the carrying capacity is. The zoning ordinance specifies minimum lot size. It doesn't specify a maximum density. So I generated that 500 number, really by taking the total acreage, subtracting out the floodway and pond piece, taking away what is typical 25 to 30% of the property, which would be for roads and storm water and those kinds of things, and then divided what was left by 5,500 square feet.
Ballpark,
And the number
ballpark
you get is
calculation.
ballpark 500. So, the reality is the topography on that site is going to be a limiting factor, and I'm not in a position to say how much, but certainly it is, and obviously, these gentlemen or whomever may or may not develop that property in the future is going to understand that a little better as they go.
All right, second question, I'll be quiet. There's a platted stub street off of, what is it, Belmont you call it?
There is.
Okay, and so we just don't see it. It's got a curb going through it.
Right, it does. That's correct. Yeah, it exists in right of way only.
Got it.
And the right of way has been dedicated, but no improvements.
Okay.
Council, next.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. One is that you had mentioned the Belmont Drive being a county road. Did you say that?
I think I did say it at some point, and that was I misspoke on that part.
Okay.
Belmont is not. Belmont's a city street.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
heard that right after I did it too. I'm sorry.
Great, okay, because I was confused. And then I just wanted to ask about the primary entry and exit point. Would that be off of Belmont or would that be off of 500?
Our intent, and this is both from an engineering perspective, but as much so from a practical perspective, because people's driving habits, the people that are going to live there adjust to, it's like water, taking the easiest route. Drivers usually figure that out as well. And that's going to be Belmont.
Right.
So we have to have two access points for redundancy because of safety.
Do you mind holding the mic?
Oh,
Now that
so-
the rain started, I think it's gotten a little loud.
Sure. We have to have two access points for safety, and certainly we'll have that, but we expect the primary access point to be Belmont. And we, as Jeff indicated, are hoping that the updated traffic study, which the Laskys will be paying for if the zoning is approved, will indicate that warrants are met and that a signal can be put there. And then the vast majority of folks will be using that access point because it'll be so much easier to get onto 46.
Right.
And certainly, we think it'll help the school as well. So that's really our hope.
Thank you. And then, when was the last time, you said the Belmont did the first traffic study? When was that done? Sorry, to put you on the spot.
That's a good question, Lane. You know, honestly, I don't remember year. It was part of the approval for Belmont, and I don't know if these guys have started to dig into that.
Yeah, we're starting to dig in. I think it was completed in 2022.
Okay, so it's 3 years.
Yeah.
Since, okay,
And that study primarily reflected increased traffic counts that would result from the Belmont's development. So the commitment that Plan Commission recommended is, like I said, for these gentlemen to update that to then reflect not only traffic that's coming from Belmont, but from this development into Pickup School as well.
okay, great, thank you.
Jeff, would this project meet the threshold, like number of doors for the park, the city parks department to get involved with the park, or would it be solely on the developer?
So the threshold that, council adopted in those recent subdivision control ordinance revisions was up to 300 lots would be common open space provided by the developer. More than that, so I believe it's 300 and more, would trigger the public park requirement. So, if we're talking, if they get right up to 300, then potentially the regulations would require that public park. Seems like most likely it's going to be less than that. So the subdivision control ordinance would require just common open space under the auspices of the HOA. Now, certainly, and included in the subdivision control ordinance is a provision where there could be discussion, really at any development size between applicants and the Parks Department to see if there's interest in making whatever that may be public park.
Would this project be seen as, from the parks, or I guess from the evaluation of number of doors for the parks to get involved with the park, would it be the RM separate from the RS4, or are they seen together, the number?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. So the subdivision control ordinance, so the regulatory trigger for that open space is going to be the subdivision plat for the single family portion. So it's really just going to be counting the RS4 portion, and whatever units there might be in the RM portion would not factor into that.
Thank you.
The developer here would be more than happy to talk with the Parks Department. As we indicated at the Plan Commission hearing, there's two ways of looking at the issues with this property, with the floodplain and with the topography and the woods and the wetlands. It is as an impediment or as a benefit. And we actually look at it as a benefit because the natural features are actually, if utilized properly, are attractive in terms of single-family development. And so when we asked for the RS4, what we were really searching out was to try to, a lot of places call it cluster-type development, where you have some smaller lots, but you have significant amounts of common area, which is what we intend to do here. That allows us to utilize the natural features of this property. That makes it actually more attractive to people that want to live here. And there will be open space swaths of it that are measured in acres in terms of being contiguous. And I think given that fact, it certainly makes sense to talk to the Parks Department, and we'd be happy to do that.
Does the pond that sits there now, does that play into your retention plan, or is it in the way?
It'll play into the retention plan. For the development that'll happen essentially higher than that pond. So really for the most eastern and southern portion
I
of
would
the
have thought
development.
it would have, because it would have been expensive to move a pond.
Yeah, but it will play into it.
And we'll need another retention pond somewhere on the site as well.
And you're planning on 250 homes?
But capped at 300. Initial investigation by the civil engineering team is suggesting it's probably going to be closer to 250. And as Counselor Miller suggested, that isn't just because of the issues associated with the topography and the other natural features. It does play into it, but there's also some areas, particularly to the east, I'll call it the uplands area, where it makes sense to have larger lots and at a different price point. The nice thing about the proposed project is it really will allow for 2 or 3 really different types of homes and price points to meet varying demands, which is exciting.
And the question was what again, Mr. Anderson? This is
I was just asking,
250.
yeah,
Probably roughly 250. And why we're not zeroing in on exact number is we do have a wetlands report that shows a significant amount of wetlands. So we're trying to work around that and incorporate that. So it's varying based on
right. I
wetlands
guess
topography.
let me ask this question more directly. Is 300 putting a dent in your business plans?
No.
So the rezoning for R4 just gives you more flexibility to really lay out the development more in relationship to the way the land is going to let you lay it out. Is that?
That's very correct. It gives us flexibility on lot sizes, but it wasn't done for density purposes. It was done for flexibility on the lot sizes.
Yeah. RS4 allows you to go to a little bit narrower lot, which allows us to bring a different product into as well.
You had mentioned, pardon me, you had mentioned the housing study and then you started to talk about the type of houses, because the city of Columbus needs all type of houses. We need lower income, median, and across the street is Tipton Lakes, and there are some, and Tipton Lakes has been being developed for years and years and years, and there's smaller houses, older houses, great big houses. So you were thinking, if you could elaborate just a little more on what you were thinking. I'm trying to get a visual of what's going to go there, and because I'm sure we're going to hear some concerns.
Yeah, at this stage, Mr. Foyce, I think we would consider it to be no more than 300, more likely like 250. We really are playing into the bands in the housing study. I have some of those. 58% of new single development should be market or high market. Market right now with construction cost is the 300 number. We probably feel that we have some in that $300 to $400 price point, right. And then some, as stated, because of the topography and the woods and the wetlands on the kind of northeast portion, some of those may go into 500, 600, something like that, kind of likened to what is across the street at Tipton Lakes. But I will also say very sensitive to trying to provide a range so people can stay within a community, stay within a school system. We know that's important without having to jump around.
Thank
you. Council, any more questions?
Will you go into a little more depth on the RM design thoughts like you did on the RS4?
Yeah. As Tim said, it's secondary. So frankly, we're really focused on the single family lot development right now. I'm not trying to deflect the question, but it's something that it was originally probably about a 2-year plan. Our land closing schedule has us closing on this land over the course of about 3.5 years. So the development is not, day one. It's over the course of probably a 5-year, 6-year plan here. The RM piece probably fits into the middle of that plan. Right now, we're thinking, we understand this character of this side of town. I don't think we ever envisioned a large apartment building, of course. But we would like the opportunity to present some multifamily housing products that we do think would fit in this area. I'm not sure if you're wanting more detail or.
Are you thinking I think story-wise, like 2 stories or?
We would see a 2-3 story combination product potentially.
Because of some of the, once you go to 4 stories, there's some requirements that kick in the building code. It probably means there won't be any, even if the height limit permitted it, there won't be any 4 stories on the property.
Right.
So, I don't, that's not in the cards. So, yeah, 3-story would be the max that was being contemplated at this point in time, and maybe 2.
And just remember, we potentially have 15 to 20 lots within our development that are going to border the multifamily piece. Those homes will sit and share infrastructure with the proposed single-family lots. So it'd be pretty short-sighted of us to not be very sensitive to housing that is bordering the multifamily piece, because our homeowners are going to be bordering as well.
Anything else, council? At this point?
We'll have comments again, right? After, we'll be able to speak again. Okay.
If there's nothing else, we'll start with the public input session. Please state your name, address. You've got 3 minutes. We're going to time it. We've got a yellow card at 30 seconds. And a red card means time is up. And I want to remind everyone that we do have the list. And just everyone's going to say what they want to say, but there's to have one after another say the same thing over and over is going to kind of get redundant a little bit. I hate to say that, but and this is not an exchange. You are addressing the council at this point. You are sharing your concerns with the council, not with the applicant. The applicant, if they choose to, at the end of the public session, can respond to any of the comments or questions that you have or that you made. That's up to them to respond. So with that being said, Carrie, you're first.
Carrie Zinabogey, 524 10th Street. My concerns have to do with the access predominantly on 500 to return back to Columbus. There's no ability on that current road to have left and right turn lanes in terms of congestion, and it is a fairly blind, like you have to scoot to get out there. I know we're going to do a traffic study, but they've already admitted that, you know, they aren't willing to foot the bill for a new traffic light at Belmont or that location, but they will foot the bill for the traffic study, which is great. And there's also no shoulders on that 500 at all. I'm also concerned with the wildlife and the amount of light that's going to flood this area, that the wildlife that exists there now wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't be as habitable. There's no transit service to any of this. And in terms of growth for the city, I think that's crucial if we're supposed to be going to, you know, a less car dependent community. That would be something that we should be focusing on. I do have a problem with approving the multifamily zoning based on the absolute vagueness of the proposal. There really is just an idea of multifamily. There's no details. So those are my concerns.
Thank you. Next. And if you know that you would like to speak, you can go ahead and start moving in that direction.
Okay. You'll have to pardon me. This is my first attempt at in a public forum. So pardon my lack of protocol. My name is Jay Beach. I live at 7830 West Point Drive in the West Point Estate subdivision. One of the questions I had to the developers, and are they going to do, because of the just expansive urbanization of the area? I mean, we bought in that subdivision the lots just because it was kind of semi-isolated and semi-rural, and because of the rapid urbanization of the area, the property values, I mean, if you probably talk to the people. I know a lot of the builders in town here. Bob Smitherman that did Princeton Park, I'm sure he was not real happy when they went into just north of Lowell Road and basically put in the box homes and devalued the homes in Princeton Park. I see the same scenario in our subdivision in West Point Estates because of the rapid the urbanization and the amount of traffic and everything else going on with that amount of expansion that quickly. I know I've talked to many of the people in my subdivision. They are not happy with this, especially, they're talking about 250 lots. That's what they're saying. So we're looking at quarter, third acre lots, and pardon my ignorance, they're talking about the RS4 development, single family homes. I don't know what that means. We're talking the homes in our subdivision anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000. You dump in a bunch of $200,000, $300,000 box homes down the street, that will negatively impact our subdivision. We are not happy about it at all. Are the developers going to live there? If they're going to live there, fine. I'm happy with it. If they're not going to live there, we don't want it.
30
Period.
seconds. 30 seconds.
That's all I've got to say. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, sir.
Dan Reynolds, and I own the 80 acres on the east side of the Belmont. I think you're throwing common sense out the window here. I know you're talking 100 acres, but you can cut off the northern part of that as, in my opinion, unbuildable. I'm sure none of you have walked out there and looked at that property, but once you get past the back of the Belmont, you got that 50-foot drop and all the way to 500 north. You got a pipeline that runs up the edge of that property because it comes out on me and then goes straight north. So you can't do anything 25 feet from that pipeline. So that takes off a little bit. There's a gully behind the nursing home there that you can't do anything with. So unless you have some ingenious people, I guess, my point being, there's 80 acres on the south side of 46. It's been for sale forever. That's all pretty much buildable. I don't know why you're not trying to talk about putting a housing addition on the south side of 46 where you've got a half a mile of road frontage. I just think this has no common sense whatsoever. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Brian?
Brian Brand, 422 9th Street. Just a couple of things. I think it's kind of important to remember what we're here for. This is the annexation and the rezone. There'll be an opportunity to look at a plat for more conversations about how this is going to get laid out, the product type, all those types of things. So, I think we've got a cooperative developer here who's got roots in the community. I think that they want to try to fill a void in the community that we certainly have right now with the housing study. And if we're talking about available land for development, we're going to be hard pressed to find properties out there that are ready to go for us that will meet all the criteria, and to have a cooperative developer who's already made concessions from the planning department in front of you now and willing to continue to cooperate relative to intersection improvements, traffic studies, traffic lights. These are all things that are good things in partnership that you want to have. That's what I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
500 West, just north of where they're talking about. I'm concerned about the traffic. 46 in the spring and the summer, especially in the fall, you cannot hardly get off 500 on the 46 because of the traffic. People coming to see the leaves, the traffic is just unbearable. Ball games at Bloomington, and when you stump, I don't care what you say, stoplights is not going to make any difference when people don't want to be sitting in traffic for a half hour waiting to get through the stoplight. I mean, I'm an individual, and I understand that. But let's face it, if you don't have more access than what you've got, turning in and out, you're going to have collisions, you're going to have wrecks. And when you try to get off 46 onto 500, or 500 on 46, you're going to have problems. Because not only is this place going in, but we have this school, we have the nursing home, we have another school across the street. We have people coming in from Grandview on 46, from Harrison Lake on 46. We have people coming from Brown County. We have people coming from Bloomington. We have all kinds of traffic on 46. And to me, a 2-lane road like 46 is just not going to handle all that traffic. Now, it may not matter to you, but it matters to me because I live there. And I want you to consider all that when you go into this. And when you start to vote, you consider if you had to live in a traffic mess as we are, you know. And I think if we want to build an addition, put it in Columbus if it's going to be a Columbus addition, instead of out in the rural area where people have to survive the way they are. That's all.
Thank you.
Funny not being at the table. So Eric Fry, Executive Director of Administration, and I just want to let you know that in partnership with BCSC, the city, and Chase Point, we've all agreed that we will pay for a streetlight and work with NDOT to make that happen. So I think that that's important for people to hear that we're committed to that. So that's it, short and sweet.
Thank you.
Janine Blomenberg, 401 North, 500 West. It's a good thing he spoke first because he addressed my issue, and that was the traffic light and how we would know that it would happen and that it would happen in a timely manner. But I do have another point, and that is the housing study that was done. It mentions some very innovative and creative approaches to solving or dealing with the housing problem. And one of those was utilizing empty buildings that already exist and renovating them for housing. And I've lived here long enough to remember when Ivy Tech occupied the building that's basically catty corner from the library, which is now a housing unit. So we've done it before, we can do it again. The housing study also mentioned you don't even need an empty building. An empty parking lot is a good alternative. So let's look for them. I'm sure there are some. I know there are many empty buildings. The housing study also mentioned building partnerships to develop strategic approaches to meeting the housing goals. And if those partnerships existed, you'd be able to affordably get empty buildings, empty parking lots, and you might even build some neighborhoods of tiny homes. And personally, I think that would be a fantastic thing for the city of Columbus to look at. It's being done in cities that are a whole lot bigger than us that are in a whole lot worse economical situations than we are. My hometown, which is Detroit, Michigan, has neighborhoods of tiny homes, affordable housing. Thank you.
In other words, don't use our farmland for that. Forgot to mention that, sorry.
Hi, Karen Day, 8070 West Old Nashville Road. My biggest concern, of course, traffic coming off of 500 is going to be crazy, but is there a way to know if it is a traffic light and not a roundabout? 46 traffic gets backed up, as they indicated before, on football days for IU, whatever. 46 is crazy, but I just pray to God it's not a roundabout. Roundabouts are terrible. They are, and the reason I say that is we have a trucking company and roundabouts for semis. It's just not feasible, but I truly hope that it's a stoplight and not a roundabout. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else on either annexation or the rezoning? This is the only opportunity to speak on either one. Silent pause. I will close the public portion on both items at this point. Council, well, first off, do the applicants want to respond to any of the questions or the comments that were made?
I think we do want to respond to a couple of them. One, with respect to the access, we know that's important. First, this almost certainly would not be a roundabout. NDOT is not going to want to slow all traffic that uses 46, which is what a roundabout would do. I'd be stunned if they wanted a roundabout. That would be shocking. This doesn't meet their criteria. And so if it meets warrants, it's going to be a signal. That's number one. Two, there will be improvements to the intersection of 500 West and State Road 46, as Jeff mentioned in his presentation. It can be cleaned up and improved a little bit right at the intersection. There's adequate right-of-way to do that. And we think it'll be safer, but that's not going to be the primary access. It's going to be Belmont, and a signal is appropriate. And even on game day, and at most there's 7 home football games a year. I don't think it's appropriate to base actions on 7 days out of 365. But even so, on those days, Signal does provide a break in traffic that will allow people to enter and exit State Road 46 at Belmont, and also from the south as well, which will be necessary. This area is going to grow. There were comments about putting housing in other areas. Your housing study requires about 300 new homes a year to even get close to the projected need of new housing stock in the Columbus community. This project can't do it on its own. We encourage creative approaches, and we think that's a great idea. More than this is needed, but this is certainly part of the solution from our perspective. It makes sense. It's a growing area, and it's frankly ripe for development, and it is going to develop, and we think this is a great first piece. With respect to the animals, again, there's going to be significant open space out here. There'll be plenty of room for the animals. I live in an area that is, if you looked at it, on the whole map on the screen would be homes, and I have deers, raccoons, you name the animal, it goes through my backyard. They're adaptable. And certainly with a project of this type, I think there's no real concern. There was a mention of the pipeline. You can kind of see it if you look carefully. The pipeline companies, which are federally regulated, they come through and clear cut the area where the pipeline's at. So you can kind of see it angling from the north east to the southwest, and you can even see it barely clips the corner of this property. It doesn't look like the pipeline is actually on this property, but part of the easement might be. But it's so small, it doesn't impact development. We're very much aware of the topography changes and the natural features on the site. We know we can't develop all of it. That's why we can't have 500 lots. Nor do we want that, frankly, but we're aware of it, and it's practical to be developed. So we think this is a good project for a growing area that meets the needs of the city of Columbus, which would be done by some hometown folks. So I'll see if either of you want to say anything else.
I'll jump in, Jack. On the issue of pricing of homes, the housing study says you need a lot of homes in all price ranges. And maybe one of the largest group that has trouble entering the housing market are young families. So having $350,000 or $400,000 homes, we would view, along with a range of other pricing on the development, we would view as a plus. Secondly, the housing study also mentioned a lack of developable land and working with homeowners or landowners in creative ways of unlocking that land. And that's what we're here to do today.
Yeah. The last thing I'll mention is just reiterating what Eric Fry mentioned, and that BCSC, the city, and Chase Point Capital will be partnering on the signal funding. So to quell any of those concerns about will they step up, who will step up, as Eric mentioned, there will be a partnership on that front.
Anything else that you'd like to say at this point? Okay, council, questions, comments?
Jeff, the RSM will, if that's approved tonight, as is, let's say they go to develop it, what kind of review process takes place when it goes
Sure. So once zoned, microphone. So once the zoning is changed on that property, there would be a subdivision plat to create that parcel. There's a number of existing property lines on the property. That could potentially be an administrative step that wouldn't see planning commission, for example. And then once zoned, they would bring forth a site plan that would be reviewed by planning department staff to make sure that all the city's minimum standards were met. If they were, it would be approved.
Okay.
There's not another public hearing, Kent, if that's your question. No.
Anything else, council, at this point?
The only comment I have, I think, one is the fact that the rezoning for the housing development seems to make logically good sense from the standpoint it gives our developer an opportunity to put a variety of products at a variety of price points forward in this community, which is extremely important. So I know that aspect of it is extremely critical. I think a lot of the discussion that I've heard, a lot of concern that they have is under the RM in relationship to the size and scope of that particular project, not necessarily fitting within that particular part of the community, that particular part of Columbus as far as that goes. So I would rather see, an additional commitment made in order to keep that scope of that project as minimal as we possibly can, but still giving you a variety of opportunities to develop that. So I would much rather see something with another condition possibly, and I'd like to hear other council members' discussion on that, to keep that within no more than a two-story development within that RM zoning criteria. So I think it then fits more in to some of the neighbors in that surrounding area. It would fit in more closely to your particular development as well from your housing standpoint. But just to keep the heights restriction down in order to make it a little bit more palatable, I think would be helpful. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to hear other comments. Thanks.
And I can concur with what Tom just said about a additional condition that would be on the zoning part, not the first part. I mean, I hear that a lot, that, and I know what the developers want to do there, but looking at and hearing what people that live out there now, the idea of a 3 or 4 story apartment building is not something that people like. So if we were to add that condition, I think the wording would be along the lines of a condition of a multi-unit buildings no more than 2 stories. And I am prepared to add that condition when we get to the rezoning part and to make that motion, but we're not on that yet. But since we're talking about both, I'll just put that out there on the table. Multi-unit buildings no more than 2 story.
Yeah, I think.
Pardon?
I think that's a good concept. I think we should also talk about density. I know in planning, for whatever reason, we didn't get into discussion more on detail on the density of the RM. And as you all know, the zoning restrictions, the zoning that we pass or don't pass is locked in with the property, not necessarily the developers. So if the developers were to have to get out of this development, whatever we choose tonight then would follow with the property. And that next person that purchases it might not have the same vision. And so we had talked about density on the RS4, but I think we should also have discussion on the density of the RM.
And I also think that they're not looking at doing the RM portion to start with. They're looking at the 98 acres and then coming back and doing the 9 acres at a later date. I even suggested the idea maybe they'll wind up changing their mind and want to possibly come before us again to change the zoning on the RM to RS4. That's a possibility, is it not, Jeff?
Certainly.
On the road?
Yeah, there's always the, just like we're having a rezoning here tonight, there's always the possibility to have another on the same property.
So that in fact, they could change it down the road, but we don't know that. So unless we put conditions here now, then we don't know what the conditions will be several years down the road from now.
And one thing, Jeff, we discussed in planning about a staggered approach on how many homes were built and then the condition of road improvements associated with that. Could you familiarize me with that?
Right, and
I don't know.
What I recall mainly from Plan Commission, Chris, was that discussion of at what point in the sequence of development, particularly the RS4 piece, would there be that second point of access? So presumably that first road comes off of Belmont. At what point does that second point of access, off of 500 come in? And the subdivision control ordinance states that there can't be more than 30 homes on a single access point for the reasons I think that Tim mentioned around redundancy and public safety. So that's part of that the subdivision process for any development is watching that 30 unit count and making sure there's that second access point before that gets exceeded.
And is that 30 units for each zoned area or total?
So in this case, it's a subdivision control ordinance provision, so it's going to apply to that RS4 area. There is not a similar provision in the zoning ordinance that would apply to the apartments. However, the Plan Commission did make a commitment that there would not be any development in RM until those two access points were provided, essentially following the same logic.
Okay.
There were several people that talked about traffic light, roundabout. I think we've addressed the traffic light that BCSC and the city and Chase Point are willing to pay for that light, which, by the way, for those that don't know, that's like a $300,000 to $400,000 cost. Doesn't seem like it should be that much, but that's what that light would cost to do. And even if NDOT wanted a roundabout, it would be millions to do that, which they're not going to do that there. That's not likely to happen. So we can submit once they do the study, and I would think NDOT would see the logic between a school being there, that a light is necessary with or without the addition of these homes. And if we take the cost of the light off the plate for them to cover, that should be an easier sell to NDOT once we do that traffic study. And then, we've had people talk about, basically you're talking about infill. The city's done a good job at doing infill. And sometimes you start running out of infill sites. And we've got one that's coming up with the TWG on Michigan. That will be another infill, and we've done some other infills. And then, people talked about, we should put it on this land or on this land. Well, we don't choose where these developers come up with a deal to purchase property. They come and present to the city. We're not. So that's up to a willing buyer, and you got a willing person that wants to commit to building homes. That isn't something that just has to come before the city. We don't go out and talk to property owners and try to twist their arm to, we need you to build apartments on the property across the road. That's just not how it works. That's all the comments I've got. Anything else, Council?
Well, how does it work? This is the first time we've had that I've been here that we've done a condition or discussed a condition on it.
When we get to the next item, then a motion will be made to put the condition on in a second, and then the council votes on that. And then after that condition's added, then we vote on the rezoning.
Okay. So maybe the discussion of density at that point, if we're going to add it to the condition, which I think we should, because as it stands in RM, approximately with this would be around 218 doors could be built on that 8 acres. Is that around? Whereas if we're talking about 2-story duplexes, townhomes, on quarter acres or less, we're talking 70 to 90 homes. So that's kind of doors. That's a big difference.
Well, I think just by putting the 2 floors on it is going to reduce that 218 automatically.
I mean, you can make a 2-story apartment complex that has, that meets the, I think, was it 900 square feet or something like that? And you could put several hundred there, I think.
But I don't think that's something that we're interested in. Now,
I understand, but it's like I said,
right.
It stands with
So,
the property.
We were made aware of this issue and the possible restriction on Monday, just 2 days ago. So we've had 48 whole hours to look at it, which, given the issues associated with the property, isn't enough for us to sit here and say, okay, we can agree to 2 stories and, this many square feet or this many units. We are looking at that diligently. It is something that we're more than happy to entertain and happily agree to additional restrictions. We understand the need for it. We would ask that between now and the second reading, yeah, I think we'll be in a position where we've completed our homework. We're in the process of doing that, and would be able to come to you with detailed restrictions in terms of stories and maybe units or square foot or something along those lines. But certainly, for the reasons that Jack went into, it was never our intent. It was never their intent to just squeeze as many units as they could on this site. But we need to do a little bit more design work on it so that, you know, it makes sense for everybody. So we'd ask that you allow us to come back on the second reading and tell you what the results of our homework is, and it will be one or more restrictions that would be in the form of a commitment that would be recorded in the chain of title regarding the RM property.
Thank you.
So I hear what you're saying, Chris. And between first and second reading, we can change that condition that we put tonight. But that's what the little sidebar was here with the attorney was it's a little harder to subtract than it is to add. So the point that Mr. Oakes was making, if we put the basic condition tonight, they report back at the next reading. If council so felt like they needed to add a further restriction at that point, that can be done before we vote on the second reading.
Understand. Thank you.
I didn't know we were splitting that into two, so that makes sense now. I understand now. So we were gonna do the limit on height
And
for
that's
this
on the
one,
zoning.
for the rezoning, and then this, for the second reading, come back potentially with restrictions
They come
on
back with
density,
some,
depending on what comes.
some answers.
Okay,
Then any change to that condition can be made before this second and final vote.
thank you. That wasn't clear to me either. That makes sense.
I thought that was correct, but I wanted to confirm with Jeff before I stated that.
Jeff, are we pretty confident that we'll be seeing the warrants for a traffic light? So we don't, like, we can go to NDOT and say we got money, and they're gonna look at it and they're like, nope, no need. Like, we checked the warrants, doesn't hit.
You know, I think we don't know for sure until we do the traffic study, obviously, Kent, and that's step one on the path to the traffic light, is to meet the warrants. I don't think Andrew's here, Andrew Beckett, our city
So
engineer, but
we're not sure.
we're not sure. I think going into Plan Commission, I think it's fair to say that, you know, Andrew expressed a pretty high level of confidence that we're going to
Yeah.
meet the warrants.
I just want to throw that out there for the public, right? So it's like, we can't drive that decision. NDOT makes that decision. Nobody else makes it. It's their highway. And, but at the same time, when the warrants are driven by primarily criterion that are numbers driven, with the exception of the safety warrant. And so when they hit the numbers, and you're getting the traffic light, whether you like it or not. You know, the best example being our new traffic light up at Edinburgh for the you know, R&L and Old Dominion up there. And so they're safety driven is also my second point there. So I think on the issue of a light, we'll get the light when we need the light. I'll just make some comments. Like, I feel like every time housing and density comes in front of us as a council, like, we have a hard time with the concept of density. Well, every time we take a developer and tell them they got to go, now, they don't want to go as dense as they theoretically could here, so it's a non-issue here. But I just want to go on the record that, like, housing costs are driven by density. And if we want to, I want to speak on behalf of the working man here. Like, every time I hear speaking here, I don't see a guy who turns for inches trying to feed the family speaking. If we want affordable housing, it's got to get denser. And so on behalf of the people who work on the assembly line who can't afford these houses, you're going to see me always push for more density. So I support this on the issue of property rights. They bought this. So if they meet the rules, I think it's important that we support them in what they're trying to do here.
Any other comments, council? If not, how would the council like to proceed on the first item, annexation only at this point?
I'll make one comment. I am going to abstain after thoughtful consideration due to immediate family property very, very close to the property on hand.
I'll make a motion to pass the ordinance on annexation and declaring it a certain territory to be part of the city.
Second.
Jay seconds. Roll call, please.
Frank Miller,
Aye.
Kent Anderson.
Aye.
Jerome Wood.
Aye.
Elaine Hilber. Chris Bartels.
Aye.
Grace Kessler.
Abstain.
Tom Dell.
Aye.
Josh Burnett.
Aye.
Jay Foist.
Aye.
So, motion passes 8-0 with one abstention. Now this, please read the second item.
Item B, first reading of an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2025, an ordinance amending the official zoning map of Columbus, Indiana, rezoning the subject property from AP Agriculture Preferred to RS4C Residential Single Family 4 with commitments and RMC Residential Multifamily with commitments. Chase Point rezoning. Jeff Bergman.
Unless there's any more discussion, I would make a motion to add a condition to the rezoning on the RM portion that states a multi-unit buildings maximum of 2 stories.
Second.
Second. And Elaine, I assume you're still abstaining?
Yes. Grace.
I mean, Grace, I'm sorry.
Clarify, that adds a sixth commitment to the RM. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Because there's 5 currently, so we're adding a 6th. Roll call, please.
Frank Miller,
Aye.
Kent Anderson,
Aye.
Jerome Wood,
Aye.
Elaine Hilber.
Aye.
Chris Bartels.
No.
Grace Kessler is
Abstain.
Tom Dell.
Aye.
Josh Burnett.
Aye.
Jay Foist.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1 with 1 abstention. So the second reading at this point, Jeff, will be July 1.
Wait.
You only
We have to vote.
the commitment, not to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
So now we have to make a motion and a second to pass it on second reading, and I'll make the motion to pass on second reading.
Yeah. Second.
Jay seconds. Roll call, please.
Frank Miller,
Aye.
Kent Anderson.
Aye.
Jerome Wood,
Aye.
Elaine Hilber.
Aye.
Chris Bartels.
No.
Grace Kessler.
Abstain.
Tom Dell.
Aye.
Josh Burnett.
Aye.
Jay Foist.
Aye.
Also 7-1 with 1 abstention. Now we're done. Thank you. So it will be July 1st, we'll be again, and at that point, hopefully, we'll have some time to put.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our official business for the evening. We did have one person asked to address the council. I'm going to wait a minute and let some of the traffic die down here. Traffic light.
Are you?
Do we have Troy Robinson here? Troy is here. He wants to discuss our ordinance on the storage of mobile home recreational vehicles on personal property, especially in your driveway. I think he has some pictures he wants to hand out, and he's going to address the council on that topic.
I took the time to write a nice little speech, but I also gave everybody a copy of the speech, so I welcome you to either follow along or read it in your own as you would later.